Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Kyle Acierno, and I'm going to be speaking to you about the commercialization of the moon, the upcoming lunar boom or bust. So we'll go to the first slide here. So I just want to start with a quick introduction. As I said, my name is Kyle Acierno. I am a Canadian and an Italian citizen. Currently, I'm living in beautiful Denver, Colorado in the USA. I did my master's degree in space science from the International Space University, and I am now working in the space industry. I am the CEO of ispace Technologies. We are a lunar exploration company focused on developing a spacecraft to go to the moon. My focus really is on new space and lunar industrialization, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. So we're going to start with a really quick overview about the moon throughout the ages and how people have viewed the moon. Next, we're going to talk about the rise of nation states and how governments were leading the charge towards the moon. Finally, we're going to talk about the billionaires and the small guys and how they're competing to get to the moon first, and whether or not this is going to be a lunar boom or a lunar bust. So I want to share this quote with you from Galileo. When he first looked into a telescope, Galileo wrote this quote that it is a beautiful and wondrous sight to behold the body of the moon. Since the beginning of mankind, people have looked up to the moon and they've been inspired by it. And this next video is going to show you a little bit about how different countries and different civilizations have viewed the moon.
The Japanese say a rabbit lives on the moon. In India, people say it's an alligator. In South America, people say it's a donkey. Northern Europeans say it's a grandmother reading a book. Since ancient times, the moon has captured our imagination.
So for thousands of years, people have looked up at the moon and had different inspiration from it. But it wasn't until the 1950s where the space race really began. Now this started in earnest on August 2nd of 1955 when the Soviet Union, responding to the US announcement of its intent to launch an international satellite for the International Geophysical Year, decided that they would launch a satellite in the near future. And so the rise of the Soviets in space began. Now you are probably all familiar with Sputnik 1. This was the first satellite that was ever sent into outer space. It was successfully launched on October 4th, 1957, and it did a full orbit around the Earth. Everybody in the world heard about this, and its success was widely acknowledged as a technological feat that was beyond what was happening even in the United States. Now, two interesting things happened here. One was the fact that no states made a complaint of a spacecraft flying above its country. As you know, planes are not able to fly above countries if they're not given permission, but today spacecrafts are. And given that there was no complaint and therefore no impingement on sovereignty, it is still allowed today to fly spacecrafts above us and above every area of the Earth. So it set this new standard in international law. Now, soon after that, in 1961, the Soviets sent the first human to space with the orbital flight of Yuri Gagarin. He flew on April 12, 1961. Soon after, the USSR also sent the first woman, Valentina, to space on June 16, 1963. Now, this achievement led to the conclusion that the USSR had a huge advantage, a space technological advantage over the Americans and over others, And therefore, during the Cold War, they were given this boost of energy and of enthusiasm and of confidence that they were technologically more advanced than the Americans. Now, of course, the Americans would not just let this happen. They would not stand by and watch the Russians take over space. And John F. Kennedy was influenced by a lot of different people, including some of the Germans scientists, the German rocket scientists who came over after World War II to develop their own spacecraft, a much larger spacecraft, a spacecraft that could send humans to the moon. Now, John F. Kennedy, in his famous speech, said that we will go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they're easy, but because they are hard. And because this goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. So without any hesitation, the Americans jumped into the space race. They did numerous tests. They failed numerous times, very, very publicly. This was the big difference between what was happening in the Soviet Union and in America. Now, the Soviet Union did things very quietly, very cautiously, and when they failed, nobody knew. The world only saw their successes. However, Americans, every single rocket that failed was viewed by millions of people. And this was obviously extremely complicated. When they were launching astronauts to space, a number of them actually died, which obviously, again, was a real impact to the feelings of most of the Americans who are watching this and about how they stood in the world. However, huge breakthroughs were made. The first spacewalk was completed, and the Americans prepared for the biggest adventure yet. And all of you who are around at that time are probably very familiar with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's first walk on the moon, the first step, which was publicly broadcast around the world to huge fanfare. And this showed that America had leadership. America was not to be defeated from a technological point of view. And some argue that this defeat was one of the big reasons for the Cold War ending. So this was in 1969. And over the next couple of years until 1972, the Apollo astronauts continued to explore the lunar surface. They had these 6 different missions and they explored different parts, they learned different things. However, the Vietnam War was about to happen, the enthusiasm was dropping, people weren't really excited about space anymore, and NASA wasn't doing a good job of getting people excited, so funding completely diminished. And then basically from 1972, there was no more missions to the moon. Exploration had basically stopped. Now that was until recently, with the rise of the Chinese in space. In December of 2013, the Chinese launched their first spacecraft to the moon. This is the first spacecraft that landed on the lunar surface since 1976, when the Soviets sent their last spacecraft. So the moon, almost for 50 years, was not visited. The Chinese deployed a rover, and that rover traveled just a few hundred meters before experiencing some mechanical problems. But the fact that China had now landed on the moon showed its growing strength in technology, in finance, and its capability to bring its citizens together to achieve something great. The Chinese didn't stop there. On January 3rd of 2019, they did a soft landing on the far side of the moon. Now, landing on the far side of the moon is extremely complex because it's very hard to keep connectivity with the Earth. So you essentially have to have a satellite that's in orbit that's able to relay that data to the spacecraft so it can land on the lunar surface. China is the only country who's landed on the far side of the moon, and that exploration and the data that's being sent from that is still intriguing scientists. But as you'll see in this next video, this is just the beginning, and China has deeper ambitions. China's ambitions have not yet stopped, and they are looking at bigger and greater things. Chang'e 5, China's third mission to the moon, was launched in November of 2020. Now, this was the first time that the Chinese attempted to do a sample return, and that was successfully completed 1 month later, when, for the first time since the Apollo astronauts, a sample was returned from the moon. Again, this showed China's extreme progress and technical capabilities in space exploration. And since then, China has only confirmed that their ambitions extend much further. Recently, they have signed an agreement with the Russians to build a lunar base. They want to do in situ resource utilization, something I'm going to talk about later, using the resources on the moon. And just recently, just a month ago, they released an image of the new rocket that they are building in order to send Chinese astronauts to the moon. So the race is on. And again, just like in the 70s, the Americans are unwilling to sit by and watch other countries dominate space. Just a year and a half ago, the Americans launched the Artemis program. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Greek mythology, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. And it was called Artemis because with humanity's return to the moon, the Americans will put the first female astronaut on the lunar surface, as well as the first person of color. The Americans are pledging billions of dollars to this program. And similar to how things are done in the United States, they are trying to do this more with a collective approach from numerous different companies instead of just being run by NASA. So with all of this happening, these big countries, the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, all heavily getting involved in the space race back to the moon, other countries also listened up. And although they're smaller, they're looking for different ways that they can also get involved. So here we have a number of different countries who have stepped forward to say that they also want to have their foot in the game. In Japan, President Abe numerous years ago said that space and the lunar exploration is of most importance to Japan. And they created a Japanese space fund. It's almost a $1 billion fund to promote the growth of the space industry. All that money will be invested into companies doing space robotics and other space exploration technologies in order to ensure that Japan is able to retain and regain some of the gains that it has lost over the past 10 to 20 years. Luxembourg announced the Space Resource Initiative. This is a $250 million program with grants and $700 million in investments. They created a new space agency called the Luxembourg Space Agency that will work exclusively with the European Space Agency on in situ resource utilization. So for those of you that don't know, Luxembourg is a very small country in the center of Europe. Now, they made a big bet in space back in the 1980s when they put satellites. They made billions of dollars from those satellites. And now they're looking 50 years into the future and thinking that space exploration and space resource utilization is going to be key. And therefore, they're investing lots of technologies, lots of money to make sure that this happens. And then there's Australia and Canada. Now, these are some of the leaders in mining across the world. They want to also take part. Each of these countries has invested $150 million, which is relatively small, but quite a bit compared to their population. They're 100% outsourcing all of their development to private companies in order, again, to develop the technology necessary to explore the moon. So these are just three examples of three different countries, but actually you can see this happening all over the world. Countries are getting together and trying to find ways that they can either, as a bloc, start to develop technology for the moon, or individually inspire the citizens of their country to put together their best minds to develop this technology. So I think it's pretty clear that nations go to the moon because they want global recognition as a superpower. They want to get that national pride. They want to make technological innovation, and they also want to inspire their citizens. But some things that are relatively new, and this is where I'm going to pivot this lecture, is to the massive returns which can be gained by investment in space technology and lunar exploration. How important is it to have access to space resources and lunar resources? And how important is the moon as a stepping stone to the rest of the solar system? So here is a chart that explains the investment over the past couple of years. Since 2013 and 2014, there has just been a dramatic increase in private VC investment in space companies, basically almost doubling every single year. The Bank of America thinks that the space economy will be worth 2.7 trillion by 2040. And Morgan Stanley, their analysis was a bit less. However, all of them do see that there is going to be a massive increase in the investments. And the way that they think this is going to happen is through these government run VCs, but also through private investors who are looking for some return. Now, next, I want to explain a little bit about the resources that are on the lunar surface and some of the reasons why people are really interested in getting there. Now, the moon itself has a lot of iron, magnesium, aluminum, calcium, and silicon. It also has high concentrations of thorium. That's what you see in the green. Now, when you find high concentrations of thorium on Earth, you also have high concentrations of uranium and rare earth elements. I will note that China's first 2 missions landed in this region where there are high concentrations of rare earth elements. And for those of you that are familiar with what's happening with the rare earth elements on Earth, the Chinese definitely dominate the market here. They control most of the resources. And there is some talk that they want to also control those resources on the moon. There's also the building blocks which are necessary, whether that be titanium or other products that are necessary to build a moon base. But finally, the most important is H2O. Water originally wasn't known to be on the moon because the astronauts had only explored essentially around the equator. However, a mission in the early 2000s where they essentially bombed the moon and then sent a spacecraft over top of it to measure some of the particles that were released, found high concentrations of ice. And the theory now is that these permanently shadowed craters, these deep craters that exist at the lunar poles, act as cold traps. And for thousands, hundreds of thousands, billions of years, ice has been accumulating at the bottom of these cold traps. And now there's an estimated 6 billion tons of ice trapped at the bottom of these moons that can be used for rocket fuel. They can be used, obviously, for humans, for drinking, for plants. They can be used as a radiation shielding. There's a lot of uses for this water. So this is the gold or the oil of Earth, is the water on the moon. Next, there is a lot of talk about the moon as a base to explore other regions. The moon is our closest celestial partner, and we can use it as a staging ground to explore different kinds of technologies that we want to test in outer space. We can use it as an area to jump off to explore other particular regions like near Earth asteroids, if we want to use the transfer orbit for Mars, and even to explore the asteroid belt. So essentially the moon will serve as humanity's first step into the cosmos. It'll be a practicing ground, and it'll be an area where if there are problems, it only takes 4 days to get back to Earth. Now, with all these things in mind, it wasn't just governments who was looking at space exploration. It was a number of entrepreneurs. Now, you're probably familiar with these men. On the top, you have Elon Musk, the chairman and CEO of Tesla. On the right-hand side, you have Jeff Bezos, leader of Amazon. And then on the bottom left, you have these guys are well known, Peter Diamandis and Buzz Aldrin, Larry Page. They created the Google Lunar X Prize, and that gave room for small guys to also enter this market. So while you may be familiar with what they're doing with their terrestrial businesses, you may not be familiar with some of their other businesses. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about now. Elon Musk created SpaceX in 2002. It now has over 7,000 employees and a valuation of over $74 billion. Now, when Elon made this company, people thought it was a joke. They did not think it'd be possible for a private company to make rockets. That's something only space agencies do. But he's changed a lot of that. He's changed space exploration completely. Most recently, actually just a few months ago, he was even awarded a $2.9 billion contract to bring astronauts to the moon. Now here you can see over the years how their rocket technology has improved, starting with Falcon 1 to Falcon 9. Even Falcon 9s have grown to the Falcon 9 Block 5 and then the Falcon Heavy. Now their progress in the development of rockets has inspired people across the world. And recently they did something that no one thought was possible. I'm going to show you this video now and how it inspired people, just like it did in the 1970s.
It's a god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair, but her mommy is yelling no, and her daddy has told her to go, but her friend is nowhere to be seen. Now she walks through her sunken dream to the seat with the clearest view, and she's hooked to the silver screen. But the film is a sad thing for she's lived it 10 times or more. She could spit in the eyes of fools if they ask her to focus on sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go. It's the freakiest show. Take a look at the low man beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, wonder if you'll ever know who's in the best-selling show. Is there life on Mars?
Elon and SpaceX were able to do something that was not thought possible. First of all, they did something as crazy as launching a Tesla into space, almost just as a gimmick. But they launched a Super Heavy, and then they landed 2 of those back on Earth. Now you can see that the third launcher actually missed the platform. However, since that time, they have been successful continuously in landing those launchers back on Earth and thereby starting to reuse rockets, something that has never been done before. Throughout history, the rockets have just been thrown away into the ocean and the costs have been incredible. But now, because SpaceX can continues to reuse these rockets, there's a huge amount of savings, and that savings is lowering the cost of getting things into orbit, which is allowing many, many more people to be involved. But Elon has even bigger ambitions. Right now in Boca Chica, Texas, Elon is building the Starship, what was once called the Big Vulcan. Now this ship is enormous. It's bigger than the biggest plane. It's 8 stories high, and it's capable of delivering thousands of tons to orbit and even bring people to the moon. Here you can see inside of what the ship is going to look like. This is going to have living quarters where numerous, potentially hundreds of people can live on this ship while exploring to Mars. Ideally, this is what this is being built for, but also to the moon. It also serves another purpose, which not too many people talk about, but the way that this program is going to get funded potentially is with point-to-point travel on Earth. So this rocket will deliver cargo or people. It will launch from probably an oil platform. It will go up, and as the Earth spins, it will come down. And Elon has said that they can do 90 minutes point to point anywhere on Earth. This will revolutionize travel and also change the warfighting domain. It'll change how disasters are dealt with. Imagine being able to ship anything, anywhere in 90 minutes. That's what he's trying to do with this ship. And it has caught the attention of people, including billionaires like Yusaku Masawa. He's one of the richest people in Japan. He famously paid $150 million for the painting he's standing in front of. And he was one of the first customers for the big starship. And he wants to bring 12 artists around the moon. I don't have time to jump into this today, but he's just one of many characters who are interested in trying to explore the moon. So SpaceX has been a complete success, but SpaceX is not the only company that's aiming for the moon. Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, recently stepped down, and many argue is going to devote most, if not all, of his attention to the whole reason he created Amazon. Now, Jeff has been an extreme lover of the space industry and of space exploration since a child. He created Amazon to be a piggy bank for Blue Origin. Blue Origin was created in 2000 and has over 2,000 employees. Jeff always says that he sells $1 billion of Amazon stock per year to fund Blue Origin. Now they are looking again at rockets for humans, but also developing a lunar lander. And those of you who are familiar probably seen that most recently Jeff flew in his own rocket into outer space and then came back down. Last week, William Shatner announced that he will go also into space and come back. For those of you who are interested, there are tickets available. They are now being sold, and Blue Origin will be happy to talk to you about, being an astronaut. But Jeff's ambitions, again, are not just in rocketry. 2 years ago, Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin released their Blue Moon lander. Now, this lander is capable of delivering multiple tons to the lunar surface and humans. And eventually, that's what Jeff wants to do, is to enable humans to land on the lunar surface. So Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are sometimes very publicly debating or suing each other or fighting about the ways that they're doing space exploration. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's not just the billionaires. As mentioned before, in 2008, Google announced the Google Lunar X Prize. Now, this is one of the largest prizes in human history. It was a $30 million competition to be the first private company to send a spacecraft to the moon. Now, this attracted over 34 teams from around the world who are fiercely competing to be the first company, country, or organization to do that. And this next video is going to just show you a little bit about who these smaller guys are and what they're trying to do.
I'm an orphan of Apollo, so as a little boy, I was watching this happen, these ghostly gray figures bouncing around too slowly on another world, and I knew that those were people up on the moon. The moon is the 8th continent. It's right there and we can see it. Heading into high school and then university, I expected, where's my space station? Where's my moon colony? What we're doing here, the Google Lunar X Prize, we're realizing this future.
The X Prize was announced at the very tail end of the summer of 2007.
Tons of teams came in to compete.
The challenge that we have is to demonstrate that what we do is viable.
We're doing something that's never been done before. We're landing a private spacecraft on the surface of the moon.
These are incredibly brilliant people who are actually going to change society.
The moon will unlock the solar system because it's a gas station in the sky. We're heading into a new era of commercial space.
Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world.
$30 million is the purse. Of that $30 million, $20 million is the first prize for the first private team to land on the moon and send back high-definition imagery, video, and data from the landing site and from 500 meters away.
I think the most resource that we need is, I don't know, engineers with magical powers.
We joke that we won't sleep till we get to the moon, and that's part of the lifestyle.
All visionaries are going to ask for ridiculous things.
This is the ultimate passion that I have, but it has a downside that I will not see my son as often as I would like to.
We're standing on the shoulders of giants trying to do something that's only been done by superpowers.
Because the problem statement is so large, it will become imperative that teams collaborate.
Space is for everybody.
Space exploration is not just a one-nation effort, it brings together the whole planet.
Unless we do something great next, we're going to sit in the same stagnant place that we are.
This could be the one epoch where all of human generation would say that was the moment that we became a multi-world species.
Looking upwards is looking to a new frontier. It's attainable by humans, but completely improbable. And to me, there's beauty in that. There's human hope.
This is the real adventure that you can have.
Until that stops being fun, we're all on board.
So the X Prize was a success in that it attracted hundreds of millions of dollars of investment to numerous companies to develop spacecraft. And you can see some of these renderings of these advanced spacecrafts. It was also successful in the way that it generated interest. Space now is not just a domain for governments. It's not just a domain for billionaires. It is a domain where someone with a passion for exploration, a passion to go to the moon, can now take part. There's actually thousands of jobs available right now in the United States for people only focused on lunar exploration, and this was not the case just 5 years ago. It also helped to generate the interest of other companies. This is a rendering of a Toyota and JAXA rover, pressurized human rover, which they want to launch in 2029, which will help astronauts to explore the lunar surface. This was just announced about a year ago, 6 months ago. Lockheed Martin and General Motors are going to be developing their own rover to explore the moon. So you can see now there's a race not only between countries and billionaires and small guys, but also corporations are now getting involved. They want to be the ones who are extending their technology to the moon. So this is the lunar boom, but it's not all good news. Unfortunately, in 2008, after 10 years, Google decided to call off the Lunar X Prize. There was no winner. No company, no team was able to get to the moon in the deadline. So Google ended it. The following year, SpaceIL, which was a Google Lunar X Prize team, attempted to land on the lunar surface, and unfortunately, they crashed very hard into the moon. Over $150 million was lost. And they didn't give up. They're still developing it, but this was a big loss to the community. India, shortly after, launched and this is a government-based mission to the moon. This is the first time that India was trying to explore the moon. And unfortunately, the braking thrusters did not work, and their lunar lander crashed very hard into the moon. Now, this just shows that lunar landing is still extremely complicated. Now, the technology has improved, obviously, since the 70s, and some, like the Chinese, have perfected it, but it is still a big challenge. There's more than just that. There are human issues as well. As I mentioned, SpaceX won a $2.6 billion contract to launch humans to the moon. Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin were not very happy about that, and they decided to sue the American government based upon an unfair award. And so now the development of this spacecraft has stopped until this lawsuit has been complete. Maston, which is another company who is trying to send their lander to the moon, announced a 1-year delay from 2022 to 2023, citing COVID and supply chain issues. So while there is a lot of enthusiasm, while there is a lot of money being pumped into this new sector, there are still a lot of problems, technological problems, human problems, supply chain problems, and it's hard to say whether this is going to be a lunar boom or a lunar bust. I do want to end on a high note today. This was just published earlier in September in Science magazine, where they talked about the coming lunar armada. NASA is funding numerous companies to go to the lunar surface, both big and small. The Koreans, the Japanese, the European Space Agency, the Canadians, the Australians, the Luxembourg are all doing the same. There are initiatives happening in the Middle East and in Africa. So while there are still a lot of technologies that are being developed, while there's still a lot of difficulties, I can tell you that within the next 1 to 2 years, it will be the most exciting time in space exploration. And I want to finish with this last video, encouraging you to look up, look at the moon, see how it inspires you, and think that someday very soon, your daughter, your niece, your nephew, or you yourself could be exploring the lunar surface.
One night I was bored in my apartment and decided to take my telescope out to the sidewalk. The moon was out and I thought, why not? Within a few minutes, people started walking over and asking what this thing was.
Hey, what is that, bro?
It's a telescope. Do you want to check out the moon? Do you want to take a look at the moon?
What is it?
It's the moon.
Where am I supposed to look?
You're supposed to look right here.
Oh, in there.
Yeah. That's where it all started, and it just sort of went from there.
I'm looking at the moon. Hold on real quick. Hold on. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I can't believe it.
Oh my God. Oh my God. No way.
No way. No way. That's the moon?
No way.
Yeah, way.
No.
Well, you can see the craters. Yeah. That is so cool.
Oh, not that.
Get closer. Get wider.
What?
What? Look at the edge. I want to see more of it. I know.
Holy. I've never seen this before. I've never seen this before like this, man. Wow. That is intense right there, boy. Woo! Bro, that look like that's right down the street, man. Man, what you got here, man? That look like that's right down the street.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? It's right.
Is that an actual image of the moon? Is it like a live image?
It's that right there. To be able to see it up close and feel like you could almost reach out and touch it, and that's what makes it real to us.
That is incredible.
I kind of felt like I just landed on the moon.
It makes you realize that we are all on a small little planet, and we all have the same reaction to the universe we live in.
Wow.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
I think there's something special about that, something unifying. It's a great reminder that we should look up more often.
So that is the end of my lecture today. I want to thank all of you for the attention. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Right now, we have about 8 questions, so I'm going to start going through them. And if you have any additional questions, I'll be standing by to answer them. So one of the first questions was from Tom in the US about conflict and how do we prevent conflict. And I can say that as an active member of this community, there are a number of different working groups which are actively participating in a number of different dialogues to try to ensure that conflict is prevented. Obviously, the United Nations has a working group called UN COPUS, it's the Committee on Outer Space, which has members from about 90 nations, which are actively discussing these topics. And they have 3 conferences a year. There's also another group called the Hague Space Resources Working Group, which developed 18 bullets or 18 guidelines, building blocks for countries to work on and try to incorporate into their national policies to prevent any types of conflicts. And these conflicts can range from just pure safety issues, landing on top of each other, to just coordination. I can tell you there's another group called GEGSLA, which is a group of like-minded countries which are working together to develop policy. So there are a number of things that are being done today to ensure that conflict is prevented on the lunar surface and to focus on collaboration. Now, that was another question that we had here regarding what kind of collaboration was happening. And I can tell you that the Artemis program is an American-led program with the collaboration of a number of different countries. Already the Japanese, the Ukrainians, the Australians, the Canadians, and a number of other smaller countries have joined this group, and they will explore together. The European Space Agency is made up of 28 member countries. They all work together to develop one common platform for space. And then there are regional things that are happening as well. So we can see that the Russians and the Chinese are working together on a lunar base. So there still are blocks of countries working together. We know that the International Space Station has been a success of bringing different minded countries together, and we hope that potentially in the future the lunar surface will serve as another beacon for humanity's ability to work together. Question from Miriam from Tucson, Arizona. Do you believe that holidays to the moon could ever be a possibility for normal people? I do think that will be the case. I think that in the next 20 to 30 years, you'll see it. Well, in the next 10 years, you're going to see people going to the moon. That's going to be a reality. It'll probably take another 10 years after that. Specialists will go and help with the construction and the development of whatever type of lunar base is built. And then 10 years after that, I would assume that the price will start to come down pretty dramatically, and people will be able to go to the moon for a holiday. And I think with the 1/6 gravity, with the view of the Earth, even for older people, just that ability to get away from the Earth's gravity, it's going to be a really fun vacation. So I think that's going to happen very soon, Miriam. The last time I spoke on Viking, I told them that they should start working on a spaceship, a Viking spaceship, to do a trip into to the moon, so that Viking partners and customers can join in on this beautiful ride. Right now, Mabel from Los Angeles is asking how much it costs to go to space. So originally, the price from Virgin Galactic was $250,000 or 5 Bitcoin. If you got in early on Bitcoin, they accept Bitcoin. Now I think the price has risen to about $350,000 per person to fly. Richard Branson recently went on that flight to prove it was safe. I think we're going to see more customers going. Regarding Blue Origin flights, they have not publicly talked about what their tickets are. So I'm not too familiar about what they are, but if you contact Blue Origin and you're interested, I think you could get a better aspect. I would say it's under $1 million right now. So Rebecca from St. Louis asks, what are the valuable resources found in space, and how soon do you foresee these resources becoming commodities? So I discussed this a little bit. The moon itself has a number of resources which are extremely important for the future exploration and long-term sustainability of humans on the lunar surface. Now, we discussed about the availability of iron, of titanium, so building blocks, silicon that we will need in order to build any type of infrastructure on the lunar surface that does exist. We also talked about water and how that commodity is essentially the oil for space. It can be used as rocket fuel when you split the oxygen and the hydrogen. That is the fuel for rocket engines. And so rocket companies want to use that to either come back to Earth or propel further into the solar system. And then finally, we talked about rare earth elements. There was also one question about lithium. So lithium does exist on the lunar surface. It's about 10 parts per million. Rare earth elements are said to be in this area around thorium. And so it will absolutely require a lot of industrialization to extract those resources. But I know that there are a number of companies which are already working on that. So I would say in the next decade, you're going to see the start of in situ resource utilization being applied at a massive scale. So Craig asks, if there's water on the moon in the form of ice, why isn't there life on the moon? And the basic reason for that is because there's no atmosphere on the lunar surface. So many people question about whether or not there is life on Mars, because Mars does have an atmosphere. There is nitrogen that can be breathed, and it's highly toxic for humans, but potentially some life could exist on Mars. But because there's no atmosphere on the moon, we are yet to find any life forms that can exist in that kind of extreme environment. I mentioned to you earlier about the Israelis launching and then crashing. And it was after the fact they revealed that they had actually had a small container of tardigrades. Now, tardigrades are some of the most robust creatures on Earth, and they are able to withstand extreme temperatures, including in the Antarctic and then also near at the bottom of the ocean, near some very hot lava wells that are expelling from the surface of the ocean. So they were attempting to determine whether or not tardigrades could survive on the lunar atmosphere. We don't know. Unfortunately, that mission crashed. Potentially the tardigrades are now multiplying and we will find some big ones. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's one of the reasons why life cannot exist on the lunar surface. There's a few more questions here regarding Jeff Bezos and why he thinks he can sue for losing a contract. I think this is it's unfortunate, but quite a common occurrence in the space industry that losers of awards will protest for one reason or another. One of the specific reasons why Blue Origin lost the contract is because they bid almost twice the amount that SpaceX did. So I think Blue Origin's bid was about $5 billion. SpaceX's was 2.5. NASA's budget from Congress is still extremely limited in what they can afford. So that the lunar program within Congress is a pretty small program. Obviously, they have a lot of bigger issues to focus on right now, and so the program is relatively small. And therefore, originally, NASA wanted to award 2 companies. However, with their limited budget, they were only able to award 1, and so they awarded SpaceX. After the fact, Blue Origin said, well, if you would have told us, we could have lowered our price, and that has resulted in now some legal action. So we'll see where that goes. Everyone hopes it's going to be resolved soon. Of course, we all believe that the moon is a big place and that there's a lot of room for other companies, and we hope that the participation of Blue Origin will continue to increase along with a number of other companies in order to ensure that there is multiple ways that we can get to the lunar surface. So Shelton asks, what would a space boom look like in the next 25 years, and what are some of the key technological challenges there are yet to be overcome before that vision can become a reality. So there are a couple different things, Shelton. I would say first launch is still expensive. A typical SpaceX launch is anywhere from 20 to 50 million for spacecrafts of our size. Therefore, one of the key difficulties, and it's interesting that it's not necessarily technology, it's monetarily. Companies need to be able to find the resources, the investment, or the customers in order to get past that first big cost, which is launch. The second capability is just increasing the size of launch itself. So now there are a few rockets which are capable of sending things to the moon, but they have not been tested, especially here in the US. The Space Launch System, which is a big rocket, is still being developed right now. But technologically speaking, the rockets need to increase in size, and they need to demonstrate their capability of launching extremely expensive products into space and lower that price down. So that's number one, is get launched down. Number two is landing. Landing, as you saw with the Israelis, with the Indians, it's still extremely complex. A lot of things have changed since the 70s. Our sensors have changed, and the way that we conduct the data, the way that everything is being calculated has, obviously improved, but how that interacts with the lunar surface is still proving to be difficult. So landing still needs to be proven out. I think over these next couple of years, you're going to see numerous more attempts to land on the lunar surface, and every company will improve with failures or with successes. So that's the second thing. The third thing is the abrasiveness of the lunar regolith. So the lunar regolith was created essentially from a process called gardening, which is thousands and millions of micrometeorites hitting the lunar surface over the past billions of years. And that has basically turned the lunar surface into this fine, very, very fine regolith, which is extremely abrasive. It's like knives. It sticks to everything. The astronauts complained about this in their first missions and spacewalks, that it was sticking to their spacesuits. This obviously has a big impact on motors and how things are working on the lunar surface. So I know that this is one of the number one technical challenges for any kind of mobile systems. And then fourth, I would say like life support systems. So, we still have to bring everything with us to the moon, meaning that we cannot stay there for very long. Until we are able to sustainably stay on the lunar surface, we won't be able to create a space boom like you saw with other booms, whether that be the exploration of different regions on the Earth, including here in the US. You need to be able to use the resources that are available on site in order to ensure long-term sustainability and a lunar boom. And then the last, and I would say the most important thing, is what? I mean, what is there really on the moon that's going to attract people there? If you look at history, there's always been something, whether that be tin or salt or gold or oil, something that drove humans to go there. I think for the moon, that has not actually been determined yet. I talked about some of the reasons why nations go. However, is that really a strong enough motivation to create a boom? I don't think so. I think we'll have to find something else, and I think that could be found. The next decade will tell us that. So John from London asks, what are the British doing? And he's saying we're behind the rest of the world. So the British, although they left the European Union, they are still a part of the European Space Agency. And so the British are still doing a lot. They're still sending astronauts to the moon. They're still developing very relevant and important technologies. I know that some companies in Britain are focused on developing RHUs. So these are essentially radiothermal heaters that can be used to do long-term power. So obviously sending plutonium to the moon, it is, from a safety point of view, it's extremely difficult. If we're able to do that in a safer way and on a smaller, with smaller amounts, then that process could become more simplified, and the Brits could be responsible for providing energy long term. One of the most complex parts of exploring the lunar surface is that, as you know, we can see the moon for 12 to 13 days, and then it disappears. Now, when the sunshine is hitting the lunar surface, the temperature is about 200 degrees Celsius. When the sunshine is not hitting the lunar surface, it's about 180 degrees negative. So the temperature fluctuations are extremely dramatic. And without a power supply, most of these technologies which are first going to the moon are going to not survive the lunar night. So therefore, if we have opportunities to develop RHUs or other types of systems that can allow energy to be given to the different types of mechanisms, that's really going to help. Michelle from Canada says that she was walking on the sidewalk and looked into a telescope recently, and the video actually made her cry. It does make me cry sometimes when I watch it too. So she's hoping that Viking tours will offer tours to the moon in the future, and I totally support that, Michelle. The last question is from Thomas regarding ispace, and I didn't want to take too much time to talk about ispace today, but I can finish on that, so thank you for your question, Thomas. ispace was one of the early participants in the Google Lunar X Prize. We were a team that, instead of just developing the lander, because we realized it was extremely expensive, we decided to just focus on developing a rover. So we developed a rover for 5 years, and our plan was to catch a ride with one of the lunar landers. But as I explained, there was a lot of delays with the lunar landers that were being developed by other companies, and so we decided to develop our own. We raised now over almost $200 million US in our attempt to build our own lunar lander. We're developing one lander in Japan, which is going to be launched next year. We potentially still could be one of the first commercial companies to land on the lunar surface. And then here in the US, we're building a larger lunar lander that can is designed to deliver about 500 kilograms to the lunar surface. We're scheduled to launch in 2024. So ispace has taken a different approach. We're a global company. Our headquarters are in Japan, offices in Luxembourg. I told you about Luxembourg, and when Luxembourg announced this big investment, we decided to go and participate in that. And then here in the US, we're also participating in programs, US government programs to bring payloads to the moon. So we are a company that's growing pretty fast. We have about 150 people globally right now. All of us are extremely excited to participate in this new sector. So with that, I think I will finish. I want to thank you again for your attention. I hope you learned something today and are inspired to look up and think about what the lunar surface is going to look like and potentially what contributions you can make. Thank you again.